Hey, old-timer, you need to move. This dock is restricted. That means you, Pops. Let's go. The voice came off the water like a stone skipped hard across the surface, flat, fast, carrying the particular edge of a young man who had spent 3 years being told he was exceptional and had come to believe every word of it. Petty Officer Second Class Ryan Mast, 29 years old, United States Navy SEALs, stood at the head of Pier 7 at Naval Station Norfolk with his arms crossed and his jaw set, and his eyes tracking the old man the way a hawk tracks something small in an open field. He was broad through the shoulders and narrow through the waist, with the kind of physical presence that had been built deliberately over years. In gyms and cold water and places most people never see. His operational shirt was dark. His pants were dark, and everything about him communicated, I belong here, and you do not. The old man had not moved. His name was Walter Cruz, and he was 81 years old. He stood at the very end of Pier 7 with his hands resting on the weathered dock rail, looking out at the gray Norfolk harbor where 3 destroyers and a frigate sat in their berths like patient iron animals. He wore a denim jacket that had been washed so many times the blue had gone silver gray, soft as chamois claw, with a collar that had lost its shape years ago. Beneath it, a plain white shirt. Below that, khaki trousers with a sharp crease that seemed to have survived purely through force of habit. His white hair was close-cropped and neat. His hands on the rail were the hands of a man who had spent decades working with them. The knuckles enlarged, the veins prominent, the skin worn to a finish like old saddle leather, but the hands themselves as still as the pilings beneath the dock. In his left hand, loosely, dangled an old coffee can with a plastic lid, the kind hardware stores used to sell. He had brought it from somewhere. He had carried it a long way. He did not look at Petty Officer Mast. The harbor smelled of diesel and brine, and the particular cold iron smell of ships that had been at sea and returned with the sea still in them. A low November wind moved off the water and picked at the collars of the junior sailors moving equipment on the adjacent pier. Seagulls worked the air above the far breakwater with mechanical persistence. The sky was a low, uniform gray that sat on the water like a lid. Somewhere on the frigate, in berth 3, a winch was running, its high mechanical complaint carrying across the dock in the cold. Ryan Mast uncrossed his arms. He walked down the pier with the controlled, economic stride of a man who had been trained to cover ground efficiently, and he stopped 3 feet from the old man. "Sir, I'm not going to ask you again. This is a restricted area. How did you even get past the gate?" Walter Cruz turned his head and looked at Ryan Mast. His eyes were gray, clouded slightly at the edges with age, but possessing a depth that felt, in the moment of contact, like looking down into water whose bottom you could not find. He looked at the petty officer the way a lighthouse looks at a boat, fixed, patient, communicating something that had nothing to do with the boat's opinion of it. "The gate chief knows me," Walter said. His voice was a low, dry rasp, the sound of gravel rolling down a very dry hill. "I've been coming to this pier since before you were born, son. I don't care if you built the pier," Mast said. "You're not authorized today. We've got operations prep running. I need you off the dock." The junior sailors on the adjacent pier had gone slower in their work. A boatswain's mate named Chen, 19 years old and 4 months into his first duty station, had stopped pretending to be busy with the line he was coiling and was watching openly. 2 more petty officers from the SEAL support element had drifted to the edge of their pier and stood watching. Which meant Mast had an audience now. Which meant, as it always means, with young men who are powerful in small kingdoms, the performance would continue. Mast stepped closer. "What's in the can?" Walter looked down at the coffee can in his hand, then back at the water. Ashes, he said. A beat. Mast's expression shifted, not softened, but recalibrated. Who? A friend, Walter said. Best one I ever had. Mast exhaled through his nose. Sir, I understand this is personal, but I cannot allow. He died on a mission, Walter said. He said it the way you say a thing you have said 10,000 times in your own mind, and are now, finally, saying out loud for reasons you do not fully control. He died on a mission, and he told me before we shipped out that if anything happened he wanted to go back in the water. Said the ocean was the only place he ever felt completely right. Said the land was temporary, but the water was permanent. He paused. He was right about a lot of things. Something moved through the junior sailors on the adjacent pier. Not sound, the opposite of sound. The particular quality of stillness that descends when people realize they are witnessing something they did not expect to witness, and are not entirely certain they are worthy of. Ryan Mast reset himself. He had a job. He had a restricted pier. He had operations prep. He had 3 hours until his element was wheels up for a training exercise, and he had not eaten since 0430, and he had an old man on his dock with a can of ashes. And he was 29 years old, and he had been told he was exceptional, and he was going to clear this dock. Sir, I need to see some ID. Then I need you to step off the pier. You can coordinate with the chaplain's office about a proper— I don't need a chaplain, Walter said. He said it without heat. I need 5 minutes. Sir, 5 minutes, Walter said. That's all I'm asking you for. That's not something I'm in a position to offer. Mast reached out and put his hand on Walter Cruz's arm, just above the elbow, with the firm, practiced grip of someone who has physically moved other people before and found it unremarkable. Let's go. Right now. The hand gripped the denim jacket above the elbow, and Walter Cruz went somewhere else. The water was black, and it was 1971, and he was 23 years old, and the South China Sea was trying to kill him in the particular impersonal way the ocean tries to kill you when you are in it at 2 in the morning, with no lights and no support, and a rubber boat that has been compromised, and a mission that was already wrong before it started. His name in those days was Walt, and the man in the water beside him was Tommy Reese. And Tommy Reese was 24 and from Galveston, Texas, and he had a laugh that could be heard from the deck of a destroyer, and a quality of absolute steadiness in dark water that Walt had never encountered in another human being before or since. They were in the water because the insertion had gone bad, the way insertions go bad, not with drama, but with a series of small wrong things accumulating until the situation was no longer recoverable by any means except swimming. The rest of the element had made the secondary exfil point. Tommy and Walt had not. They swam for 4 hours. The current was against them, and the water was warm in the way of the tropics, which is to say it was warm, and it was enormous, and it wanted nothing from them either way. Tommy swam, without complaint, without drama, with the same economy of motion in black water that he had on land, in training, in every situation Walt had ever seen him in. At one point, 2 hours in, Walt's left calf cramped so badly that he went under for a moment, and Tommy's hand found his collar in the dark and held him up, still swimming, talking quietly about nothing. The last game the Astros played before Tommy shipped out. A girl named Sandra, who worked at a diner in Port Arthur. The specific quality of the sunrise over Galveston Bay in October. They made the recovery point. They were pulled out. Walt threw up seawater on the deck of the boat, and Tommy patted his back and told him the ocean was just marking its territory. Tommy died 14 months later on an operation that Walt was not on, and that was never officially acknowledged, and that took 3 years to be mentioned, obliquely, in a document that was mostly redacted. Walt got the news in a parking lot outside a base in Virginia on a Thursday afternoon in November, and he sat in his car for 2 hours before he could drive home. He had been carrying the can for 11 years. Tommy's sister had given it to him at the funeral, a private gathering. No ceremony, just people who knew. And she had said that Walt had loved Tommy almost as well as she had, and that Tommy had said, more than once, that if anything happened, he wanted to go back in the water with someone who understood what that meant. Walt understood what that meant. The dock returned. The diesel smell, the gray sky, the iron weight of the ships in their berths. Walter Cruz looked at the hand on his arm. Then he looked at the harbor. His own hands were steady. Petty Officer Chen, on the adjacent pier, had stopped coiling his line entirely. He was watching with an expression on his 19-year-old face that had bypassed understanding and gone directly to instinct. The instinct that tells you something important is happening, and you should not look away, and you should not interfere, and you should, if at all possible, do something. He excused himself from his position quietly, walked back up the pier, and found a corner behind a mooring equipment locker. He pulled out his phone. He did not call the quarterdeck. He called the chief's mess, the number he'd been given on his second day, the one the chief boatswain's mate had told him to call if he ever saw something that felt wrong in a way he couldn't name. The chief picked up on the second ring. Chief. Otieno. It's Petty Officer Chen from Pier 2. I'm sorry to bother you, sir. There's an old man on Pier 7 trying to scatter ashes, and Petty Officer Mast is removing him, and I think he stopped. He did not know how to say the next part. What's the old man's name? Chief Otieno said. I don't know, Chief. I could try to. Go find out. Chen walked back to the pier. He listened. He heard Walter say his name. Say it the way old men say their names when asked, without emphasis, as a simple fact. And he walked back to the locker and called Chief Otieno back. His name is Walter Cruz. Chief. The silence on the other end lasted 5 seconds. In Chen's 19 years of life, he had never heard a silence like it. When Chief Otieno spoke again, his voice was completely different. Not the flat professional tone of a man answering a routine call, but the tone of a man who has just been told something that has rearranged the furniture of his understanding. Do not let Petty Officer Mast remove that man from the pier, Otieno said. Do you understand me? Do not let anyone touch him. I'm making a call. Chief Otieno did not call one level up. He called the Command Master Chief. The Command Master Chief heard the name and stood so fast his coffee cup skidded to the edge of his desk, and he said 3 words. Get the Admiral, and walked out of his office, still buttoning his jacket. Rear Admiral James Holloway, Commander Naval Surface Force Atlantic, was in the middle of a briefing on maintenance scheduling for the spring deployment cycle when his aide stepped in, leaned down, and said 4 words quietly in his ear. The Admiral looked at his aide. The aide's expression confirmed that the aide had heard correctly. The Admiral stood, excused himself from the briefing with the brevity of a man who has decided that everything he was just doing has become secondary, and he walked at a pace that was technically not running out of the building toward the waterfront. On Pier 7, Ryan Mast had increased his grip on Walter's arm and was applying gentle but unmistakable pressure toward the shore end of the dock. Walter was not resisting. He was simply not moving, the way a piling does not move when the tide comes in, not with stubbornness, not with defiance, but with the complete physical certainty of something that has been in one place for a very long time. Son, Walter said. Very quietly, I would like to finish this. Sir, I've asked you multiple times. The sound came before the sight, a low, rapid clatter of boots on the dock planking. Not one set, but many. A formation moving with the coordinated purpose of people who have been given a destination and a reason. Chen had stopped pretending to coil line entirely. The other petty officers on the adjacent pier had gone completely still. Rear Admiral Holloway walked onto Pier 7 at a pace that acknowledged no obstacles. Behind him came his aide, Chief Otieno, the Command Master Chief, and 4 additional personnel who had simply been in proximity when the Admiral left the building and had understood, from the look on his face, that this was a moment to follow. The Admiral saw Mast's hand on the old man's arm. He saw it from 15 yards away, and something in his face did something that made Ryan Mast, who noticed it because he had turned at the sound of boots, and who was not a stupid man, release his grip and take an involuntary half-step backward before he fully understood why. Admiral Holloway stopped in front of Walter Cruz. He removed his cover. He straightened, and he rendered a salute, full, formal, held with a precision that seemed to contain within it the entire accumulated weight of the institution that had produced it, directed at the 81-year-old man in the faded denim jacket with the coffee can of ashes. He held it. 1 second, 2, 3, 4, 5. The seagulls worked the air over the breakwater. The winch on the frigate had stopped. The only sound was the low wind off the harbor and the water moving against the pilings. Walter Cruz raised his right hand and returned the salute. His hand was steady. The Admiral lowered his hand. He turned to face the assembled witnesses, Chen, the petty officers from the adjacent pier, Mast, the aide, the chief, the Command Master Chief, and the small, watching silence of the ships in their berths, and he spoke. My name is Rear Admiral James Holloway. What I'm about to tell you is no longer classified, though most of it was for longer than Petty Officer Mast has been alive. He did not produce a document. He spoke from memory, which is where the things that matter most are kept. Chief Warrant Officer Walter Cruz, United States Navy, Naval Special Warfare. Date of enlistment, August 1967. 11 years of active duty. Theaters of operation, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and 4 additional locations that remain classified at the operational level even now. His unit, Detachment Golf of SEAL Team 2, conducted 47 confirmed direct action missions between 1968 and 1972. He was awarded the Bronze Star with Combat V, the Silver Star, the Navy Cross. He was recommended for the Medal of Honor in 1971 for actions involving the recovery of a compromised element in open water under direct threat, but the recommendation was denied on classification grounds because the mission itself could not be acknowledged. He paused. Around the pier, the silence had taken on a specific texture. The texture of people who are trying to hold themselves very still because something is pressing on their chests from the inside. The man whose ashes are in that can, the Admiral continued, is Chief Petty Officer Thomas Reese. SEAL Team 2. Killed in action, November 1972, in an operation that remained classified until 2019. He and Chief Warrant Officer Cruz were the only 2 members of their element to successfully swim 4 miles in open water to a recovery point after a compromised insertion in 1971. Tommy Reese kept Walter Cruz from drowning during that swim. Walter Cruz has been waiting 50 years to return the favor. He looked at Ryan Mast. Not with anger, with something more instructive than anger. The call sign Cold Iron appears in exactly 9 operational reports from that period. In naval parlance, Cold Iron means a ship that has gone completely dark, no power, no engines, no signal. An absence that is also a kind of presence. The men who knew that call sign knew what it meant. It meant that Walter Cruz was in the water. And when cold iron was in the water, things got done that nobody else could do. The harbor moved beneath the dock. The gray sky sat on the water. Ryan Mast stood very still and felt, with the particular acuity of a young man who has just been shown the distance between what he thought he knew and what he actually knew. The full weight of the last 20 minutes. The formal review of Petty Officer Mast's conduct was completed in 11 days. He was not separated from the service. He was young, he was talented, and the institution that had produced him believed in its capacity to produce something better from the same material. He was assigned to a senior chief for mentorship review, and his deployment was postponed by 60 days, and his record was annotated in language that was neither vague nor forgiving. He was sitting in the passageway outside the review office when he heard footsteps on the deck and looked up. Walter Cruz stopped in front of him. He was wearing the same denim jacket. He did not sit down. His knees, he had said once to someone who asked, were not what they used to be. He stood, and he looked down at the young petty officer, and he put his hand on the man's shoulder. The same shoulder. The inversion was not lost on either of them. "You have gifts," Walter said. "I can see it on you. The training, the discipline, the physical capability, all of it real. None of it fake." He paused. "But gifts aren't enough. Gifts are just the entry fee. What you do after you get in the room, that's the part nobody can give you." Mast looked up at him. His jaw was tight, his eyes carrying the specific misery of a proud man who has been comprehensively wrong. "I didn't know," he said. It was not an excuse. It was a fact. "No," Walter said. "You couldn't have known." "That's not the point." He let the pause sit between them, clean and unrushed, the way a man leaves space for a thing to settle. "The point is that you moved before you understood. Speed's a virtue in the water. On the dock, with a stranger, it costs you. Learn to be still first. Fast second." He removed his hand. He nodded once. He walked back toward the exit, and then stopped, and turned. "Tommy would have liked you," he said. "He liked people with fire. Said they just needed to learn to aim it." He walked out into the November afternoon without looking back. It was 3 weeks later, on a gray Tuesday morning, with a wind off the harbor that smelled of brine and diesel and the cold patience of things that have been at sea a long time, that Ryan Mast walked to the end of Pier 7 on his day off and stood at the railing and looked at the water. He didn't know what he was doing there, exactly. He had not planned to come. He had simply woken up that morning and known he needed to be at the end of the pier. And he had come, because the last 3 weeks had done something to his ability to ignore things he would previously have ignored without effort. He heard footsteps behind him after a few minutes. Walter Cruz came to the railing and stood beside him. He had a small paper cup of coffee from somewhere, and he offered it to Mast without a word. Mast took it. They stood together in the November wind and looked at the harbor where the ships sat in their berths like patient iron animals, and the water moved beneath the dock with the particular indifferent permanence of something that was here before them, and will be here after. "Did you?" Mast started. "Last month," Walter said. He was looking at the water. "On a morning like this, the Admiral let me have the pier for half an hour before reveille. Just me and Tommy and the water." He was quiet for a moment. He's back where he belongs. They stood there for a while longer. Neither of them spoke. The water moved. The ships held their ground. The wind came off the harbor with the cold iron smell of the sea, patient and enormous, keeping its own time. That is the thing about the men who were in the water. The ones who held each other up in the dark, in the currents, when no one was watching and the mission had already gone wrong. They do not advertise what they carry. They do not ask for recognition. They come to the ends of piers on gray mornings with paper cups of coffee and cans of ashes. And they finish what was started half a century ago in black water on the far side of the world. And most of us walk right past them and never know the depth of what is standing there. Some men go cold iron so that the rest of us can have lights. If you were moved by Walter Cruz's story of quiet courage and lifelong devotion, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. And be sure to subscribe to Veterans Valor for more stories of America's unassuming heroes. Script based on the Veterans Valor Master Framework. Title: Navy SEAL told the old man to leave the dock until cold iron froze the whole fleet.